there's something deeply wrong happening in your house right now, and you've probably blamed yourself for it. Last winter, I visited a reconstructed medieval cabin in Iceland. It's February. Outside temperature is minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit. This cabin was built in 1320 using techniques that are 700 years old. There's been no heat source running for 3 full days. No electricity, no gas, no fire. I step inside with a thermometer. The reading stabilizes at 48 degrees. 48 degrees after 3 days of abandonment in sub-zero conditions. Now compare that to your modern home. It's 50 degrees outside, not even freezing, and you're wearing a hoodie indoors. Your thermostat says 72, but your feet are cold. Your back feels chilled. You turn up the heat. The furnace kicks on. Your energy bill climbs, but you still feel cold. What is going on? Here's what I discovered. You are not actually cold because the temperature is low. You are cold because your body is being thermally drained by the walls around you. And the medieval builders knew exactly how to stop that from happening. I started digging into this 3 years ago when my own heating bill hit $340 in January. My house was built in 2015. Modern insulation, double-pane windows. The thermostat was set to 71 degrees. But every evening I found myself pulling on a fleece jacket just to sit on my couch. I thought I was crazy. Then I found a study from the Delft University of Technology published in 2015. It changed everything I thought I knew about temperature. The study measured how the human body actually experiences warmth. Turns out, your body doesn't feel the temperature of the air around you. Your skin has thermoreceptors. But they're not measuring air temp, they're measuring radiant temperature. Your body is constantly radiating heat in the form of infrared energy. If the surfaces around you, the walls, the floor, the ceiling, are cold, they absorb that radiant heat. Your body keeps pumping out warmth, and the cold surfaces keep sucking it away. You feel cold even though the air temperature is technically warm. The researchers called this the mean radiant temperature, or MRT. It's the average temperature of all the surfaces surrounding you, and here's the kicker. In a modern home with thin walls and no thermal mass, your MRT can be 15 to 18 degrees lower than what your thermostat reads. So your thermostat says 72, but your walls are 54 degrees. Your body is losing heat to those walls faster than the warm air can replace it. You are in a thermally hostile environment. Your furnace is fighting a losing battle. I tested this in my own house. I bought a thermal imaging camera, one of those FLIR units. On a night when it was 35 degrees outside and my thermostat read 70 inside, I scanned my living room walls. The drywall surface temperature was 56 degrees. My hardwood floor was 52. My body temperature is 98.6 degrees. I was radiating heat into surfaces that were 40 degrees colder than me. No wonder I felt like I was sitting in a freezer. Then I visited that Icelandic cabin. Same thermal camera. Outside temp, minus 15 degrees. Inside air temp, 61 degrees. But here's what shocked me. The interior surface of the log walls measured 58 degrees, only 3 degrees cooler than the air. My MRT was nearly identical to the actual air temperature. They built homes that created radiant comfort, and the key wasn't keeping heat in, it was storing heat in the walls themselves. Let me show you how they did it. There was no roaring fireplace in the center of the room. Open fireplaces are thermal disasters. I learned this the hard way. Cold outside air gets pulled in through every crack in your house to replace the air going up the flue. Inside this mass there's a firebox, but it's small. You light it, you burn it hot and fast. The combustion is intense, clean and complete. Temperatures inside the firebox reach 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. But here's the genius part. The exhaust gases don't shoot straight out through a chimney. Instead, they're forced to wind through a labyrinth of channels built inside the stone mass. The hot gases snake up, down, and sideways through the masonry. As they travel, they transfer their energy to the stone. By the time the smoke finally exits through the chimney at the top, it's barely warm. I've measured exhaust temps from a well-designed cockaloon at 150 degrees. All that heat, the energy from combustion, is trapped inside the stone. The stone heats up to 300, 350, even 400 degrees Fahrenheit in its core. But the surface stays at a safe 140 to 160 degrees. You can touch it, you can lean against it. Children can sleep next to it, and here's the magic. That stone radiates heat for 12 to 18 hours, one fire, one burn, and you're warm until the next evening. A study from Aalto University in Finland tested this in 2017. They reconstructed a traditional Finnish masonry heater and monitored it over the course of a winter. They burned 45 kilograms of birchwood, about 99 pounds, in a 2-hour fire. The stone mass absorbed the energy. Over the next 18 hours, the heater radiated a steady output of heat. The surface temperature stayed between 145 and 165 degrees the entire time. The room air temperature held at 63 degrees, but the mean radiant temperature, remember that term, was 67 degrees. The occupants reported feeling comfortable in light clothing. Compare that to a modern forced air furnace. That same 99 pounds of wood, if burned in a standard fireplace, would give you maybe 4 hours of heat, and most of it would go up the chimney, or converted to equivalent energy. A gas furnace burning that amount of energy would have to cycle on and off constantly, blasting hot air for a few minutes, then shutting down, then kicking back on. The air temperature swings wildly. You feel warm, then cold, then warm again. Your body never stabilizes. The cockaloon gives you constant radiant warmth with zero fluctuation, and it does this using 1/3 the fuel of a modern heating system. I visited a family in rural Sweden who still uses a cockaloon that was built in 1742. It's been in continuous operation for 282 years. They fire it once in the morning, once in the evening. Their home stays at 62 to 64 degrees all winter. But here's the part that blew my mind. The heat from the stone doesn't just warm the air, it warms everything in the room. This is radiant heat. Radiant heat travels in straight lines, like sunlight. It doesn't heat the air directly, it heats objects. When you stand next to a cockaloon, infrared radiation from the stone strikes your skin, your clothes, your furniture, the floor. Those objects absorb the energy and warm up. Now those objects are radiating back at you. You're surrounded by warm surfaces. Your body stops losing heat. In fact, you start absorbing heat from the environment. This is why you can sit comfortably 3 meters away from a 160-degree stone stove in a room where the air is only 60 degrees. Your body feels warm because the surfaces around you are warm. Now compare that to forced air heating, the system in almost every American home. Your furnace heats air to 120 degrees and blows it into the room through a vent. That hot air rises. It collects at the ceiling. Your ceiling is 75 degrees. Your head is 72 degrees. Your torso is 68. Your feet are 58. This is called thermal stratification, and it's miserable. You have a hot face and cold feet, so what do? You turn up the thermostat. Now you're blasting even more hot air, wasting even more energy, and your feet are still cold. A Danish study published in 2019 tested this exact phenomenon. They put test subjects in 2 identical rooms. Room A was heated with forced air to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Room B was heated with a radiant panel system to 59 degrees. The subjects wore identical clothing. They were asked to rate their comfort on a scale of 1 to 10. Room A, the 72-degree forced air room, averaged a comfort score of 6.2. Room B, the 59-degree radiant room, scored 7.8. People were more comfortable at a lower air temperature because the radiant heat kept their bodies in thermal equilibrium. The study concluded that radiant heating can provide equal or superior comfort while using 25 to 30% less energy. Medieval Scandinavians didn't have thermostats or studies. They just built what worked, and what worked was stone mass radiating heat in all directions. But even with a perfect heat source, even with radiant warmth flooding the room, you still have a problem if your walls are bleeding heat. And that's where modern construction fails catastrophically. Before we go further, I need to ask you something. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's your thermostat set to in winter? And do you still feel cold? Because if you're nodding your head right now, you're about to understand why. And if this is making sense, if you're realizing your expensive modern home has been lying to you, hit that subscribe button. Every week I'm digging up medieval knowledge that the construction industry buried on purpose. Now let's talk about insulation. And let's talk about the biggest lie in modern building codes. A perfect seal would be 0 ACH. My house, built in 2015 to modern code, scored 6.8 air changes per hour. That means every hour the entire volume of air in my house is replaced almost 7 times. Where's it leaking? Everywhere. Around electrical outlets, along baseboards, at window frames, where the walls meet the foundation, around light fixtures, through recessed ceiling lights, at pipe penetrations. Every single hole drilled through your walls for wiring or plumbing is a leak point, and those leaks add up. I did the math. My house has about 12,000 cubic feet of interior space. At 6.8 air changes per hour, I'm losing 81,600 cubic feet of warm air every hour. In the dead of winter, when it's 10 degrees outside and 70 degrees inside, I'm losing heat equivalent to leaving a window wide open 24/7. Not a small window, a 20 by 20 inch window, just hanging open, all day and all night. That's not insulation failure, that's structural hemorrhaging. Now here's what kills me. A study done in Norway in 2021 tested the airtightness of preserved medieval log cabins. Here's the final piece of the puzzle, and it's the one that changes everything. Modern walls have no mass. Let me break this down. The exterior wall of a typical American home is built like this. Half-inch drywall on the inside, a plastic vapor barrier, 3.5 inches of fiberglass insulation, half-inch OSB or plywood sheathing, Tyvek house wrap, then vinyl siding or thin wood cladding. The total weight of this wall assembly is about 10 pounds per linear foot. There is almost no mass. And because there's no mass, there's no capacity to store heat. When your furnace kicks on, it heats the air. The air warms the surface of the drywall, but the drywall is only half an inch thick. It heats up in minutes, and it cools down just as fast when the furnace shuts off. There's no thermal inertia, no buffer. The temperature inside your house swings with every furnace cycle. You're riding a thermal roller coaster all day long. Now let's look at a medieval log wall. A 12-inch diameter log of old-growth Nordic pine weighs approximately 80 pounds per linear foot. That's 8 times the mass of a modern wall. But it's not just about weight, it's about heat capacity. Wood has a specific heat capacity of about 1.7 kilojoules per kilogram per degree Celsius. That means it takes a lot of energy to change the temperature of wood, and once it's warm, it takes a long time to cool down. When a fire burns in the cockaloon, radiant heat strikes the log walls. The surface of the wood warms up, but the heat doesn't stop there. It penetrates deep into the wood. Over the course of hours, the entire 12-inch thickness absorbs energy. The wood becomes a thermal battery. Here's where the physics gets beautiful. When the fire burns out and the stone stove begins to cool, the room air temperature starts to drop. But now the log walls, which are warmer than the air, begin to radiate their stored heat back into the room. The logs slowly release energy for the next 12 to 18 hours. This creates thermal stability. The air temperature doesn't spike and crash. It gently rises and falls in a smooth curve. A 2010 experiment at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology tested this directly. They built two structures, each about 430 square feet. One was a reconstructed medieval log cabin built to 14th century specifications. Solid logs, 12 inches in diameter, hand-scribed joints, no modern insulation. The second was a modern prefabricated house built to current energy standards. R25 insulation, vapor barriers, triple glazed windows. Both structures were heated to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Then they cut the power, no more heat. Outside temperature was -8 degrees. The modern house dropped to 36 degrees within 9 hours. After 24 hours it was 28 degrees, uninhabitable. The log cabin dropped to 54 degrees after 48 hours. After 72 hours, 3 full days without any heat source, it was still at 43 degrees. Above freezing, still survivable. Why? Thermal mass. The logs had absorbed so much energy during the heating phase that they continued to release it for days. The modern house had nothing to give. The air cooled, and that was it. I need you to understand how radical this is. The log cabin had an R value of 10. The modern house had an R value of 25. On paper, the modern house should have performed better. But R value doesn't account for thermal mass. And thermal mass is everything. There's another factor, the density of the wood itself. Medieval Scandinavian builders didn't use just any trees. They harvested old-growth pine and spruce from the far north, trees that had grown for 100 to 150 years. In the cold northern climate, trees grow slowly. The growth rings are incredibly tight. I've seen samples with over 100 rings per inch. This makes the wood extraordinarily dense. A cubic foot of old-growth Norwegian pine weighs about 37 pounds. Modern plantation pine, grown in warmer climates with ample water and fertilizer, grows fast. Wide rings, a cubic foot weighs about 28 pounds. That's a 30% difference in density. More density means more mass per volume. More mass means more heat storage. It also means the wood is stronger, more resistant to rot, and far more durable. The log cabins that survive today are built from this old-growth timber. And because of that density, they've been standing for 600, 700, even 800 years. Modern stick-framed houses start to deteriorate after 30 years. Let me give you a real-world example of how this plays out. In 2022, a research team in Iceland monitored a restored turf house built in 1750. This house had log framing and thick turf walls for additional insulation. They tracked interior and exterior temperatures over a 2-week period in January. No active heating during the monitoring period. Outside temperature ranged from -18 degrees to +10 degrees over 24-hour cycles. That's a swing of 28 degrees. The house was acting as a thermal flywheel, smoothing out the wild swings of the outside world. Now think about your modern home. When it's 20 degrees at night and 45 degrees during the day, your indoor temperature would swing just as wildly without constant furnace intervention. You're not living in a thermally stable structure. You're living in a tent that requires 24/7 life support to remain habitable. So here's the truth. You don't feel cold in your modern home because the temperature is too low. You feel cold because your walls are cold, because cold air is leaking in constantly, and because hot air is stratified at the ceiling while your feet freeze. Radiant heat from a stone mass warmed people and objects, not just air. And they did this 700 years ago without a single watt of electricity. We abandoned that knowledge. We traded it for speed and low upfront cost. And we built houses that are thermally fragile, houses that are on permanent life support, dependent on a continuous supply of electricity and gas. But energy is not cheap anymore, and it's not getting cheaper. Natural gas prices have doubled in the last 3 years. Electricity costs are climbing. The grid is becoming unstable, and people are realizing that their expensive homes are fundamentally flawed. They're building with cross-laminated timber, or CLT. These are thick panels of wood laminated together, creating walls that are 8 to 12 inches thick, solid wood, with genuine thermal mass. They're combining these CLT panels with modern airtight construction techniques and radiant heating systems. And they're seeing energy consumption drop by 40 to 60% compared to conventional builds. In summer, they didn't need air conditioning because the thermal mass buffered the heat. Residents reported fewer drafts, better air quality, and a more stable indoor environment. The wood naturally regulated humidity, absorbing moisture when it was damp, releasing it when it was dry. No mold, no dry air, no mechanical humidifiers running constantly. You don't have to live in a log cabin, but you can incorporate thermal mass. If you're designing a new build, look into CLT or solid log construction. You'll feel warmer at lower temperatures and use less energy. Prioritize air sealing above all else. Pay for a professional blower door test. Seal every penetration, every outlet, every seam. That investment will save you more money than adding another layer of insulation. Designed for compactness, open floor plans with cathedral ceilings are thermal disasters. Lower ceilings and closable rooms keep heat where you need it. Use thermal zoning. Heat the living spaces where you spend time. Let the bedrooms stay cooler. People sleep better in cool rooms under warm blankets anyway, and think long-term. A house that costs $80,000 more to build but saves you $3,000 a year in energy, that's a payback period of less than 27 years. They completely ignore thermal mass, airtightness, and resilience. The result is a housing stock that is energy dependent and thermally fragile. Heat is about energy storage, radiant exchange, and air control. The Scandinavian farmer in his 14th century cabin didn't have a thermostat. His log walls stored the warmth. His moss and clay chinking stopped the drafts, and his body, surrounded by warm surfaces, felt comfortable at 60 degrees. He wasn't fighting nature, he was working with it. We've spent the last 80 years fighting nature with brute force energy. We're pumping heat into leaky boxes, watching it escape, and pumping in more. We're running on a hamster wheel, burning money, and still feeling cold. The medieval approach was the opposite. Build a structure that holds energy, heat it strategically, let physics do the work. If you found this valuable, if this explains why your $400,000 house feels colder than a medieval hut, hit that subscribe button. Next week I'm investigating why medieval bread stayed fresh for 3 days without preservatives, and yours molds in 48 hours. The answer involves something the industrial baking industry desperately doesn't want you to know. So what's your take? Are you going to look into thermal mass for your next project? Are you going to get a blower door test? Let me know in the comments below, because this knowledge, this physics, it's not lost, it's just buried. And every time someone builds with mass, seals their air leaks, and uses radiant heat, they're proving that medieval wisdom still works. Wisdom that kept people alive and comfortable in -30-degree winters without a single watt of electricity. Wisdom that we need now more than ever.